Earlier this week, the Prime Minister announced plans for a new policy banning any research into eliminating the natural ageing process. This has been sparked by new statistics on population trends forecasting overpopulation, and it is believed that potentially making people immortal will compound this issue. Although the natural ageing process is difficult to define, this policy seems to be focusing on the idea of keeping people at a functional level we would consider a 25-year-old to be at. Michael Corbyn has been investigating the economic implications of such a policy. Over to you.
Thanks, Declan. Aging is a major crisis developed countries face at the moment and is set to accentuate in the years to come. Given the fact that it affects demographics of entire countries, it is paramount to tackle the issue. Economically, an aging population leads to labour shortage, as we can see in Italy, Sweden and Japan, for example. On the contrary, eliminating the natural aging process would lead to an economic boost. Even if people retired at roughly the same age as now, the decreased cost of caretaking and treating diseases associated with old age, combined with the fact that they will still contribute to the economy, would result in increased economic flexibility. Additionally, there is the prospect of people working for a longer period of time. More experienced individuals lead to increased productivity. Back to you, Taplin.
Thank you, Myrtle. We now have Dr. Lillian Leitzel, an economist who has just written the bestseller Go Big or Go Recession, Concerns and Issues on Overpopulation, and Dr. Emmett Kelly, a senior researcher from the Haldane Biomedical Institute. So Lillian, what's your take on the policy?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to clear the common misunderstanding that eliminating aging would lead to immortality. That is not true. There are other major causes of death, such as road injury or HIV, for example, which are not related to old age. Going back to your question, I don't believe in the assumption that eliminating aging would lead to overpopulation. If we take a look at Japan, for example, where the demographic transition is moving towards an older population, we can see that this has caused a drop in birth rates, and that will be a similar phenomenon to that of removing aging.
And what exactly does this imply for Japan?
Well, what we're beginning to see in Japan is a new equilibrium in which the decrease in mortality is compensated for by a drop in birth rates. This creates a situation where there are more pensioners dependent on the working population. However, a drop in natality, and therefore the number of children, means that the proportion of the population dependent on the state remains stable. In the case of removing aging, the potential pensioners could then still be working and thus provide for the state rather than be dependent on it. It may appear to be counterintuitive, but if we're extrapolating from real-life case studies such as Japan and several other countries with post-industrial economies, then it's a fair assumption to make.
So Emmett, what's your take on this?
My biggest fear is that if this policy comes into effect, then it could potentially prevent research into degenerative diseases and cancers. These are symptoms and integral parts of the aging process. A lot, if not all, cancer research is actually exploring these aspects. And if this becomes illegal, then no progress whatsoever can be made in this field. The death count alone associated with these diseases should be enough incentive not to pass this policy, in spite of the fact that the government will not invest the same amount of money into research and thus creating a more stable economic environment in times of recession. In terms of...
If I may interject, Emmett, this would only have a short-term effect on, with regards to the financial aspect. Eliminating the aging process would render this point moot, as we would avoid the current long-term costs of caretaking and enabling people to have access to medication. We would save the same amount of money.
Moving away from the economic side of things, I'm afraid we're going to have to begin wrapping up. If you'd like to make a couple of concluding points or mention something about the ethics.
Yeah, in terms of ethics, there's definitely a huge risk that if an anti-aging treatment becomes available, it will exacerbate existing inequalities. As with previous drugs, wealthier citizens and countries receive it first, no matter who would benefit most from them. However, if we ban new drug development based solely on the inequality of their distribution, then we wouldn't produce any drugs, no matter what they're for.
I agree. We can't just ban research and fear it won't be distributed fairly. To conclude, I think this policy overlooks certain key issues and shows a blatant disregard for the current world economic state. I don't see a cure for aging in the near future. Nonetheless, I think if a cure was discovered, then we should embrace it rather than condemn it. It would solve far more problems than it would cause.
Thank you very much, Emmett and Lillian. I hope we have shed more light on the debate that has been dividing society.